Hey guys, you're listening to episode 136 of Stand Up. Joining me today, the author of The Family and the inspiration for the Netflix series The Family, author and journalist Jeff Sharlet. Then I'll be talking to media critic and journalism professor Jeff Jarvis. Jeff Sharlet, Jeff Jarvis, Pete Dominic. Stand up with him right now. Hey guys, I don't know why I said stand up with him and had to talk in third person. It's always annoying when people do that, but I just wanted to start the show slightly different than I normally do. And while I'm saying that, before I get going, I want to remind you to subscribe with a paid subscription at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. This show airs every single day. I'm doing it entirely myself, from the edit to the promotion to the prepping and, of course, the booking of these guests, which is the great value. The guests on this show can't do it without your support. Please support independent journalism. Yes, that's what I'm going to call it. Journalism right now. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Learning more from these guests each and every day along with you. Before I get to today's guests, a few things I want to comment on and play for you. The big story over the weekend was that American intelligence officials had informed President Trump at some point back in March that they believe Russia's military intelligence agency had secretly been offering bounties to Taliban or Taliban-linked militants for the killing of American troops in Afghanistan, and the president has done nothing and said nothing about it. An explosive Friday report in the New York Times, now confirmed by a number of other media outlets, including this report from CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh.
Extraordinary developments here. A European intelligence official is telling me that they are aware that Russian intelligence officials offered cash incentives to Taliban militants in Afghanistan, the people who the US has been fighting along other nations for many years now, to kill US or UK troops recently. Now, this European intelligence official is not clear as to the precise motivation behind the Russian intelligence offer, and it's also not clear precisely when this happened, but it is clear in their assessment it did result in coalition casualties. Now, it's not clear if that's deaths or injuries, but it is quite startling to hear this sort of accusation levelled. I should go on to say the European intelligence official says, quote, "This callous approach by the GRU, the Russian military intelligence arm accused of offering these cash incentives, is startling and reprehensible. Their motivation is bewildering." Now, I should point out, too, that this European intelligence official says that actually a precise unit in the GRU, the Russian military intelligence, known as 29155, is apparently behind these cash incentives. This same unit was behind the poisoning of the Skripal father and daughter in Salisbury a couple of years ago almost now, and also other alleged prominent attacks in Europe. I should point out the Taliban has denied anything to do with this alleged offer, saying they don't need foreigners to tell them how to conduct their jihad, and also, too, the Russian embassy in Washington has called this part of a hashtag Blame Russia campaign and denied it fully as well. The White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, has in fact just come out with a statement saying, while she hasn't really denied the precise reports and the intelligence itself, she said that the New York Times, who first reported this story, citing US officials mostly, that they were inaccurate to suggest that President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence had in fact been briefed on it. But startling revelations here about Afghanistan.
Startling revelations indeed. Good reporting from CNN and, of course, the original reporting from New York Times. A number of other outlets have confirmed that reporting, and we're not going to hear the end of this. The Lincoln Project already up with a new ad criticizing President Trump for not doing anything, and this is just more evidence that for some reason Trump will do anything that Vladimir Putin wants him to, and rarely, if ever, say anything that Vladimir Putin wouldn't want him to. And now let's go back to last week when Vice President Mike Pence, whose name will go down in infamy to the point where his grandchildren would probably have to get rid of the name Pence, refused to say the words Black Lives Matter to a Philadelphia news anchor who did a great job pressing him. Well, this week he was on national news with John Dickerson of CBS, who is great. Dickerson tried again to get Mike Pence to say Black Lives Matter, and Pence couldn't do it. He was like the Fonz trying to apologize.
One thing protesters would like to hear is leaders say Black Lives Matter. You won't say that. Why?
Look at that pause. Did you hear that? Whew, here he goes into the rant. I've sped it up for you.
All my life, I've been inspired by the example of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When I was in Congress, I traveled to his home church in Montgomery with Congressman John Lewis. I walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge on the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. I cherish the progress that we have made toward a more perfect union for African Americans throughout our history. And I've aspired throughout my career to be a part of that ongoing work. It's really a hard issue for me.
Because I don't know or really like people of color, much less care about them. It's really hard issue for me. What's so hard? Say Black Lives Matter, you jackass.
And as a pro-life American, I also believe that all lives matters, born and unborn.
Oh, with the all lives matter abortion bullshit. You don't care about all lives matter, certainly after they're born, you stone cold, stupid sycophant.
But what I see in the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement is a political agenda of the radical left that would defund the police, that would
leave that out of it. Just
tear down monuments, that would press a radical left agenda that and support calls for the kind of violence that has beset the very communities that they say that they're advocating for. I've literally met with African American leaders around this country,
such as Diamond and Silk and Don King. He hasn't met with Black Lives Matter leaders.
And in the national capital area who made it clear to us they want law and order, they want peace in our streets.
So you won't say Black Lives Matter?
John, I really believe that all lives matter.
Okay.
And that's where the heart of the American people.
Oh, there he is, with the heart of the American people. Bullshit. Oh, he wouldn't know the heart of the American people if they served it to him on a very white platter. There he is, Mike Pence, disgracing himself yet again. Good job to CBS's John Dickerson, who also called him out on his falsehoods and the president's falsehoods when it came time to all things COVID-19.
To get the economy open again, testing has to happen. The president said if we didn't do testing, we'd have no cases. That's wrong and misleading. Given how important testing is, why is the president saying things that are wrong and misleading about testing?
Great question, Dickerson. I sped it up for you because dumb Mike Pence talks as slow as he thinks.
Well, I think it's inarguable that the historic increase in testing that we've accomplished in this country has played a role in the new cases, particularly among younger Americans. John, I want to remind your viewers that 2 months ago, in most states in this country, we were not testing people that had no symptoms or were below a certain age. We were focusing on seniors. We were focusing on those with symptoms. But now, because of the public-private partnership that President Trump initiated, we're literally able to test anyone in the country that would want a test and come forward. We scaled it with great American innovation.
Mr. Vice President, 125,000 Americans have died. We're 6 months into this. Testing is crucial to get the economy opened and because of public health.
Right.
And the President of the United States, with the biggest megaphone on the planet, is saying something about testing that is wrong and misleading. Is that the standard we want for the President of the United States?
And I'm not even going to play you his response because I've already wasted enough of your time hearing Mike Pence, but I just wanted you to hear a little bit of that and, of course, the good questions that John Dickerson asks. As for the president himself, on Sunday, he tweeted out video from a retirement community called The Villages in Florida, where the retirees were fighting amongst themselves, rolling by in golf carts with Trump flags and cheering for Trump and kind of a caravan, if you will, were the Trump supporters, and then the anti-Trump people were holding up signs yelling at them. But as you can hear, one Trump supporter yelled very clearly, "White power." And then the president shared that video, tweeting, "Thank you to the great people of the Villages." And then later on, apparently, he deleted the tweet, but doesn't matter. He already sent it out. Damage is done. The president of the United States shared a video that had people, his supporters, saying white power. Here is that part of the video.
White power! There you go, white power. Do you hear that?
No big deal. Just an old guy yelling white power to another old guy. All hell breaking loose in the Villages retirement home. I like this lady, though. She's impressive.
Fuck Trump! Oh, you got the language. Fuck Trump!
Nasty language.
Oh, listen to your president if you want nasty language, you idiot.
So the president apparently deleted that tweet of the video from the old folks yelling at each other down in Florida, but That didn't stop journalists from asking the president's supporters in Congress and in the cabinet about it. Here is the only black Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina on CNN with Jake Tapper.
President Trump just retweeted a video this morning featuring one of his apparent supporters shouting white power. Take a listen.
White power! Yeah, there you go, white power. You hear that?
What's your reaction to the president retweeting that?
Well, there's no question. He should not have retweeted it, and he should just take it down.
Does it offend you, though? I mean, it offends me, and I'm white.
Well, listen, I mean, if you watch the entire video, you can't play it because it was so profanity-laced. The entire thing was offensive. Certainly the comment about the white power was offensive. There's no question. I mean, we could play politics with it or we can't. I'm not going to. I think it's indefensible. We should take it down. That's what I think.
Nothing, Senator Scott, about the damage that does to just everything, the social fabric of the United States of America, the fact that the president of the United States is just not hiding his own white supremacy. Senator Tim Scott, another guy who is going to go down terribly in history for his support of the president on almost all things. And CBS News, let's go back to CBS News, John Dickerson, who had NAACP Legal Defense Fund Sherilyn Ifill on. He asked Sherilyn Ifill about the president tweeting the video where a guy said white power. Here is her response.
This is really not about the president taking it down. This is about the judgment of the president in putting it up. It's about what the president believes, and it's time for this country to really face that. I spent the first few years of this presidency with reporters asking me questions over and over again about whether, in fact, the president was racist and whether he supported white supremacist ideologies. I'm through answering that question because the president answers it himself, and he did this morning.
Dickerson also asked Sherilyn Ifill about the vice president earlier on his show not being able to say the phrase Black Lives Matter. Here's that.
What you think he misses about that phrase and what it means in this moment?
I think that we don't have enough time on this program to actually explore all the things the vice president is likely missing. Even if the vice president had said Black Lives Matter, it would be hollow, and I wouldn't believe it because he is the vice president of the United States, just like we have a president, just like we have senators, and they should be judged by their actions and what they do. When I hear the vice president say that for his entire life he has been guided by the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., then he would know what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said about protests in 1965 and 66 that protested police violence in African-American communities when he said riots are the language of the unheard. So to hear him say that and then at the same time hear his comments about protests demonstrate that the vice president is far from understanding the significance of this moment and really what his obligation is when people across the country in 50 states, not just black people, but people of all races are coming together and standing together and saying enough is enough.
There's Sherilyn Ifill on CBS News Face the Nation. All right, let's head down to Florida where this dumb, belligerent fuck Ron DeSantis is the governor. Florida, a state that reported nearly 9,000 new cases of COVID-19 on Friday. And it's hard to imagine anything aging more poorly than this clip from the governor of Florida just over a month ago. Take a listen to this.
People in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened.
Well, it's happening now. Florida is in a disastrous situation, as is Texas and Arizona. And speaking of stupid, here's Sean Hannity on May 20th, again, saying Florida and Texas got it right. And, well, did they? I don't think so.
We know how to do this. We know how to do it safely. Americans are screaming to get their freedom and their country back, and they're even willing to wear masks in the appropriate situations. Florida got it right. Texas got it right. And guess what? Now it's time for all the states to follow their lead. And by the way, we can learn from some states that were successful. More importantly, we need to learn from the abject failures, meaning New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Look at your screen. New cases in Florida are now down 14% since they're reopening. New cases in Georgia down by 12%.
And you probably know the story now, but on Thursday, California and Florida reported their highest daily totals of new cases yet. And Texas became the sixth state in the nation to surpass 100,000 cases, according to the New York Times database, where cases there have doubled over the past month. Doubled. So the numbers are spiking in several states, and the pandemic is not going away anytime soon. COVID-19 not going away anytime soon. We heard from the president's task force and Dr. Fauci last week, and no one is telling you in the world of science and expertise that it's going away anytime soon, yet things are seemingly, quote, returning to normal in certain parts, of course, of the Northeast, where we've flattened the curve. But what does the autumn hold, and when will it be back? We await it and worry about it as we watch it spike in other parts of the country. And it's hard. It's really hard because of the uncertainty, because of how difficult it is to figure out where we're supposed to do, where we're supposed to go, how we can plan for anything. But I want you to know I'll be right here with you, talking to you every day, talking to experts, asking your questions, and talking directly to you. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. Let's get to my first guest. I first interviewed author, writer, journalist, professor Jeff Sharlet back, I think, in 2010 for his book, The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power and C Street. Since that book was published, well, a couple of years ago, I guess it's now, 2019, Netflix produced a 5-part series called The Family, which many of you have emailed me and asked me about. Well, Jeff was kind enough to join me for a really long conversation, and we talked both about the book, about the Netflix series, and, of course, about his most recent article in Vanity Fair, where he talks about who he met and what he learned when hanging out at Trump rallies. Jeff Sharlet is on Twitter, at Jeff Sharlet. You should get his books. You should watch that Netflix series, and I'm sure that he is going to be back on again. Here's my conversation right now with Jeff Sharlet. Jeff Sharlet, it is good to see you. It's been way too long since I talked to you. I think I talked to you the first time for your book, which came out in, 2010?
There's been a few of them. I think we talked in
The Family,
2010 or 2009. Yeah.
I don't mean this to minimize you to just one book, as I just mentioned. The book that, it seemed to really put you on the map and blow you up in such an important way of your work. And now I got to ask you about the Netflix series, too, because I don't know how much of a hit it has been for Netflix, but because of my world, so many of my listeners and friends have said, have you seen this? I said, yeah, I've known about Jeff's work for years. It's not new to me. But then they say, is this real? My question to you about that is, first of all, I hope you made a sweet deal with them, because that thing seems to be a massive hit for Netflix. How big of a deal has it been for them and for you, the series?
It's an interesting story. You don't make as much money. You think, oh, great, I'm going to be on TV, I'm going to be in movies. You don't make as much money as you thought you would. But for them, I think it did well. And it was sort of interesting. I don't really even mind saying this now. I think Netflix, there was sort of a regime change there, and I think the new regime was not as excited about it as the old regime had been, and they're sort of like, yeah, whatever, we know, let's release this in August, which is not great time. And it just moved by word of mouth. So it was no Tiger King, but yeah, it did really well. And what was interesting, what's fascinating to me is you do something on Netflix and suddenly your work is in 100 languages because they're showing it around the world. And here's your review in the American paper, and here's your review in the Romanian paper. It was big in Romania.
Wow.
And there was even that you could see actually sort of certain countries where it was actually big in Romania because that organization, that the American Christian Right, really comes in with a heavy foot. You get these congressmen who know that nobody and the rest of the world cares what happens in Romania, they can run it like a fiefdom. So they knew who these guys were. So you could see that kind of weird international reaction. And that, I think, has had a long-term ripple effect as well, because journalists in those countries, too, pick up the investigation.
I remember, though, reading about the family in the book, this first book that we're talking about, and thinking, man, I wish everybody could hear my interview with Jeff, and I wish everybody would go by and read this book, because it's pretty much one of the, like, I had that book on a list, and it was behind me, and it was always there. I was like, this is the book in the world of politics and religion that everybody should read and know about. And I would bring up your work a lot. My point being, it's so important for people to know about all of your work here. I don't know how to describe it, but the nexus between Washington and Christian nationalism, or whatever we describe it. And then so to see the Netflix series be such, in my opinion, again, a hit, and now you're saying in languages all over. I mean, obviously that's great for you and flattering and so on, but how important do you think it is that it gets out to a much wider audience? And what, if anything, does it change that more people know about your journalism and your research on these issues?
I mean, it's not so much more people know about my journalism and research. I think the long-term project is you have these many, many streams. That's how you build movements. It's how you build ideas, right? So when I first published The Family, in 2008, and the reaction then was, what? Impossible. This is ridiculous. I mean, I remember the Washington Post actually ran an editorial, not an op-ed, an editorial denouncing it, because there was a Republican Congressman, Frank Wolf, Northern Virginia, and there's no way Frank Wolf would ever be involved in such a thing. I'm like, well, okay, here are his letters from the archive. And they ran the editorial before they did the reporting. They had to run a correction. Since then, over time, The Family and the problems with The Family have become something. Now the New York Times, which in 2008 scoffed, they did terrific reporting actually showing how lobbyists use The Family's big annual event, the National Prayer Breakfast. They sell tickets, for $100,000 because it's such a sweet deal to get in there and get access to the legislators, the lawmakers who are doling out the money. You see lots of more academic historians saying, okay, I want to count for American power. I need to talk about this group and this strand of it. And that's how things happen over time. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily saying, oh, Jeff Sharlet. The point is the story that you're trying to tell, that becomes part of the larger.
Well, that's what I meant to ask, and I appreciate your modesty there. But I mean, I wasn't always saying, I was saying read Jeff Charlot's work, but
pay attention to this organization.
Yeah, and there's other journalists now doing some really good work. As you know, I just talked to Sarah Posner and Catherine Stewart has a new book out here. And
books.
Yeah, really important books. But so my next question is how much has things changed with The Family, with the organization, with all of the threads since you wrote that book, and obviously since Donald Trump took power? Because when we get to your Vanity Fair piece in a minute here, it seems like a vastly different and even new, to some extent, ideology that has taken place amongst religious Trump supporters.
Yeah, and that was a big question for us in making the Netflix documentary. What was this group's relationship to Donald Trump? And just The Family, it's the oldest and most influential Christian conservative organization in Washington, and just sort of nutshelling it for people. Unlike most Christian right organizations, they're not interested in the masses. They're not interested in your soul or mine. They believe that Christianity got it wrong by focusing on everybody, that really the point is to find those in power and to give them more power so that they can build God's kingdom on earth. So it's a kind of, when you think about it, it's a kind of aristocratic fundamentalism. It's not interested in the many, but only in the powerful few. And I thought, given that, it might actually be at odds with Trumpism. They might put a brake on Trumpism.
Right.
This is one power base. They're not all powerful, but it's one power base. And they might say, hey, we're not going to go along with that. And I was wrong. They embraced Trumpism. And the thing is, they've always embraced Trumpism overseas. They support dictators, authoritarians, and so on. At home in the United States, there's always been this sense of a little bit of democratic norms. They made that deal just like the rest of the Christian right and went more or less all in on Trump. And, that's the great horror of Trump, is he has managed to bring so many different factions of the right together. Those of us who don't look at the right, not part of the right, can imagine it as this big monolith. The reality is, like any social movement, it's filled with factions who do not get along. And what's scary is when you have a figure like Trump who can bring them, it's not into a big tent, but it's a nasty tent.
I don't want to go off on a tangent about the Democratic Party, but when you think about the Democratic Party or the progressive movement, there's way more factions, it would seem, and interests. And that's why I think Democrats have always had a hard time bringing a unified message, unifying the party in terms of the different factions. And yet the Republican Party isn't, like you just said, a monolith, but I feel like it's a house of kind of libertarianism and theocracy and capitalism, and they're all combined. So it's fewer groups or ideologies, thus a little easier to unify under a big tent, which is now, I think it's fair to say, Trumpism. But when you look at the progressive movement, the Democratic Party, it's way more diverse. Not going off on a tangent about Democrats, but do you think that's true, that there's a lot more factions and interests in ethnic groups and in religious groups in the Democratic Party?
I don't know if there's more. I think there's more fundamental divides. Although keep in mind, the family, and I describe their religion, which they would sometimes speak of as biblical capitalism. This idea of capitalism in the Bible, right? They're free market fundamentalists. So for them to align with Trumpism is a pretty big transformation. It's not just cosmetic. But I would say that the divides in the progressive movement and the Democratic Party, those certainly aren't the same thing at all, are really sharper, right? You see this in the candidacy of Joe Biden, who, is a guy who hasn't just had a different point of view. The official line is, we just have different ideas about how to get to the same place. No, this is a man who massively expanded, I want to get into this kind of thing, massively expanded the carceral state. He was trying to get to a different place.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that one way or the other. I'm not, getting into those fights. I'm just saying what we speak of as liberalism and the left and Democratic Party, in that sense, no, it's not as all going in the same direction as the right is. The right is all going in the direction of this concentration of power. And that's not true on the left.
You mentioned free market capitalism and that belief, but we both know that there has never really been that, and now less than ever. I mean, like, this idea of free market capitalism is simply that there's one set of rules, applies to everybody, you all compete, let the winner win. But in fact, just looking at the trade war, that's the opposite of free market capitalism. Not to mention, just every industry has a rigged system of regulations and rules that apply to them and make it harder for other people to compete from telecom to finance to obviously the oil and gas industry. So it's the idea that Trump is a free market person. No, it's just always rigging the system for whatever your interest is, it feels like.
No, he never was. The family were free market fundamentalists, but you're right. It was crony capitalism. Yeah. I remember doing a guy from the Cato Institute, which is the sort of the right-wing libertarian think tank.
Yeah. The Koch brothers founded.
Because the right-winger, he comes to that, looking at the family and my work on it sort of skeptically, and then he's looking at this and he says, this is just crony capitalism by proxy. Huh. You get together in a prayer cell and one guy says to the other, I think Jesus is telling you that you should take this sweet deal sitting on the board of this oil advisory group or someone. It's just what God wants, Oh, it's what God wants. Okay, if God says so, I will take the money. So it never was free market. And Trump, in his sort of, okay, I'm not going to be free market, I'm going to be protectionist, that's just rhetorical. That's a rhetorical move, too. He's still serving the interests of big business. It's still that sort of movement toward consolidation of power for few.
Right. Jeff has a great piece at Vanity Fair, which I will link to in the show notes and on social media and everything. And for this piece, you went to a whole bunch of Trump rallies and talked to a whole bunch of the hardcore Trump supporters. Obviously, they're the cream of the crop because they go out. They're the biggest fans. That's true of music and comedy and everything. If you actually leave your house and go to an event and wait in line, you really like this person. And so I don't know how you would compare them to a run-of-the-mill Trump supporter or someone who's not so excited about Trump, but is still. But how, talk to me about your reporting and where you went and kind of who you talked to before we get into the real nitty-gritty of the terrifying things that you've learned.
Yeah. I wanted to me, what was interesting is the role religion plays in these rallies. I see these rallies as in some ways like a religious ritual. And so I sort of wanted to travel around the country. I went to one in Bossier City, Louisiana, and I went to Florida, I went to Pennsylvania. And then I was building on this reporting I'd done in 2016, where I'd done the same thing going around the country. So I had a point of comparison. What were the rallies like in 2016? What are they like now? And it's funny that you say the cream of the crop. I had not thought of them in those terms, but it is true. Trump loves to tell them, says, you are the elite. He says, you are the elite, those who come out.
Sure.
A friend of mine was calling them the hateful dead. Which is because
can we keep going?
Yeah, there's some of them who really go to rally. I mean, I met people who've been to dozens of rallies.
Yeah.
There's all the same.
One guy went to like 70, I think you wrote.
Yeah, yeah. There's bad dancing. There's weed in the parking lot. There's this sort of weird celebratory mode that I think surprises a lot of people. They don't imagine that as what's happening in a Trump rally, but it's there, and it's there all built around this kind of core, this nexus of hate.
So, given on the fact that you did this kind of reporting in 2016 or 2015, I would imagine, was it 2016 after he was elected, or were you reporting, because this is important to my question?
Early 2016, March and
before the
April.
Election. Yeah. Because I was at the conventions, and certainly, I was on the air live on SiriusXM and CNN a lot during that time. And I wonder, my experience, and I'm not a journalist the way that you are for sure, but I'm more of a comedian, if anything, but my experience was limited versus obviously the kind of a journalism that you're doing, talking to a lot of people. But I wonder if you feel like there's a change in kind of the ideology from 2016 on the way up to the election to what is you experienced and learned more recently and document in this terrifying Vanity Fair piece. How much has that ideology changed from what it was to the crazy conspiracy theories that it has become, you think?
I came back from the rallies in early 2016, and this is before Trump had won Indiana, and still most, the smart money said he didn't have a chance. And I came back terrified. And I'm like, oh, this is a movement. This could go in a big way. This time I set out and I said, well, I know what it is. I know what I'm going to encounter. And I came back again terrified because it had morphed. It had grown. In 2016, the ideology was what I call, it's not what I call, it's called the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
It's this idea that, God wants you to get rich quick. Look at Trump. He's a wealthy businessman. Follow him. You'll get rich too. That's not it anymore. Now it's about the destruction of secret enemies. It's about paranoia. It's much darker. It's much more violent. And it's this kind of constant flirtation with a sort of essentially a civil war rhetoric. It is more openly about hate now than it was in 2016. In 2016, it was about how great Donald Trump was. In 2020, the rallies are about how absolutely evil his enemies are. And that's a scarier move.
And when we get into this description of the absolute evil, we can understand why everybody should be terrified. But I've also been talking about this a lot on the show because of my limited contact with some Trump supporters that I've been talking to on the phone, people that I just found on social media, reached out to and had conversations. Some I taped and aired, and one I just couldn't, for the same reason it seems like you couldn't write some of the things in this article in your Vanity Fair piece, or weren't sure to, because it was so way out there and even hard to understand. But again, just going back to the before he was elected and after, I don't remember there being a QAnon, and I don't remember all the pedophile stuff. If it was fringe then, we can talk about how we would frame it now, but I don't even remember that stuff then, before he was elected. I don't even know if Alex Jones was talking about that stuff before he was elected. Was he? Was QAnon there?
No, QAnon wasn't. QAnon really came into its own shortly after the election. Remember, there was the insane Pizzagate theory that because in the WikiLeaks dump of Democratic emails, you would find people saying, hey, let's meet at this pizzeria in Washington called Comet Ping Pong. It's got good pizza. And the deep minds of the right, instead of thinking maybe they're all going to the pizzeria because it has good pizza, no, they must be going because there's a child trafficking ring. It's possible that they want pizza at the pizzeria, right? And a man traveled from North Carolina with an assault rifle and opened fire, and thank God didn't hurt anybody. But it was out of that QAnon grew, and these so-called Q drops, as from this sort of anonymous person or persons, claiming to be sort of an insider in the government. And we started to get this whole ideology and theology, a religion of Trumpism. And that's post-election. It's sort of like they've got their man in. Now what's going to happen? And immediately, remember, like every movement president ever, and he's a right-wing movement president, immediately he begins to disappoint them. Immediately the world doesn't transform. So what do? They come up with this vast conspiracy theory. Well, it's true. He hasn't, Hillary's not in jail yet. He said, lock her up. And yet she's not in jail.
Right.
It's because he's playing the long game. Don't worry, everybody. He's got a plan, and it's bigger than you imagine. Not just Hillary's going to jail. Obama's going to jail. Everyone that you didn't like in your life is going to jail, or worse.
I mean, nothing is too far removed to hear from these people. I mean, you said, the people you don't like in your life are going to jail. Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe they would believe that. My father-in-law is a bastard. He's going to go to jail now too. It's like the things that they believe and say are. I don't even like to make fun of them because I don't think it's helpful. It's hard not to as a comic, but I don't know that it's helpful. It's more just really, really terrifying. So, you mentioned that it wasn't just disagreements on policy, on politics, and so on, but now the opponent, generally speaking, Democrats, are pure evil. And I have heard that a lot too. And Jeff, you wrote in this most recent Vanity Fair piece what I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, but what I've been saying for the last couple of weeks was based on just a couple of conversations and things I found on the internet, which when I read you read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I might be right. It might be a wider
really
thing. And what I mean, the point is, when I keep screaming, because a lot of, I think, the Washington kind of conventional wisdom in media is still that a lot of this stuff is fringe. It's fringe. And I think that it's mainstream Trump supporters, a frighteningly large percentage, hard to know, believe that Democrats and Joe Biden and any number of specific people are running pedophile rings, are pedophiles themselves, and cannibals, and eating human beings, we learn in your article. This shit is so terrifying and evil, and I don't think it's fringe, and that's what I think you're trying to say. It's not.
It's really not. And not every Trump supporter reads QAnon conspiracy theories online. I met plenty who had never heard of QAnon.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean that they didn't believe QAnon ideas. And that's how those ideas move out. In the same way that not every Trump supporter is a devout fundamentalist Christian. But of about the 100 or so that I spoke to, I maybe met 2 or 3 who did not think that God had a role in his selection. And that included a lot of people who didn't go to church, but they said clearly he's chosen by God. I get to the first rally, Bossier City, Louisiana. The second guy I meet is wearing a Trump mask, an American flag shirt on which he has badly pressed black letters saying "Got Trump?" ? And his name is Yusuf Jones. Which he hates his name. He says it's an Islamic name. It was given to him by his hippie mother. And he starts doing an impression. He starts bending over and sniffing the blacktop. And everyone around him gets it. They know exactly what he's doing. Aha, Creepy Joe. Creepy Joe sniffing for boys, because it is so widely known in this world that Joe Biden, from their point of view, is a child molester. And, so suddenly this was not something like one little guy. Same thing happened to me. I was in Florida, on the floor of the arena. I'm talking to a woman, and this was not the first time I'd heard about cannibalism being a problem in the Democratic Party. But she starts crying and talking about this. And I'm surrounded by a group of people. We've been standing there for a long time. And by the way, part of the reason I'm hearing this is most of the press stays in a metal cage.
Right.
They don't just go as part of the rally. We're talking about ordinary things. We have a lot of hours waiting. So our conversation is not political. When it's not political, it's not particularly, there's nothing striking about it at all. But then she starts talking about cannibalism. So I say to the other folks, I say, do you believe this? And not everybody does. Not everybody says, well, I don't know about cannibalism. And you see what's happened there. The window has sort of moved, right?
Yes.
Cannibalism for that person is too extreme. No, I think yeah, obviously they do pedophilia. I don't know if they actually eat the children.
But if you can believe one thing, there's no anything, aliens and anything you want, anything you make up, they're magical sorcerers. If you believe one thing that's crazy, then you're vulnerable to believing the next thing, from pedophile to cannibal. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and you're expanding the possibility. And this is, by the way, not unusual in authoritarian systems. This is how you work, right? You have to dehumanize the enemy. You have to make it. This is not partisan. This is not about policy. Hey, we might have a disagreement about issues, but the reason I have to exterminate you is because you are committing the most heinous crimes. And think about it. It's a little bit in the terms of the logic of this has sort of died out. But remember, in the past, there were abortion clinic bombers. And in their mind, if you think abortion is murder, what ends are not justified to stop it, right?
Right, sure.
Well, if you think the Democratic Party is practicing pedophilia and cannibalism, what ends are not justified to stop it? And you get then validation from the man on the stage. And I think this is where the press falls down. It really falls down because they're still trying to cover Trump as if he's politics. And that's not what he's doing up there. So we saw in that Tulsa rally just this last Saturday, the line that comes out of it is Trump says, I told my people to slow down on testing. An outrageous statement. But not paying attention to some of the other language, like if Joe Biden is elected, he'll subsidize late-term abortion. Not true, but okay. We're still in the realm of political. And post-birth execution. He just said that the candidate of the Democratic Party is for executing babies. And if you're a QAnon person and you think, that's right, QAnon told me that they were into cannibalism, and the president just said this. Now, it doesn't even feel like conspiracy theory to you anymore. It's like, oh yeah, that's just verified empirical fact.
So that's an interesting criticism about how Trump is still covered. And I wonder if you can give us any examples of kind of like the way that this this coverage is still being handled like a kind of a normal politician, the way that you think it should be handled.
Yeah. One rally I went to, Hershey, Pennsylvania, the so-called sweetest place on earth, where the streetlights are shaped like Hershey Kisses, and real Trump country. And he gives this speech there that he must have dedicated, 15, 20 minutes to descriptions of crimes that he said were committed by undocumented people, illegals, monsters, animals, he says. And it was so graphic and so gory, decapitations, disembowelments, and not just the term, he's describing it. Just as he did in Tulsa, by the way, describing these animals carving up young women with knives. It's always implicit. He'll always tell you the race of the perpetrator, and then usually, not always, the hair color of the victim, which is usually blonde.
Is that right? I never noticed that part.
Beautiful young blonde teenage girl, and they beat her to death with baseball bats. He repeats the words. He invites you in to listen to it. It goes on for 20 minutes. This is Faces of Death. This was so, my stomach was churning, not even because of any politics, just because he's describing such gory details.
Yeah.
The press reported none of that. And not because they're covering it up, but because they're treating it, okay, well, he's not talking about any kind of policy there or anything. That's just for show. That's not just for show. That's the main event. When he then goes back to his teleprompter and he says, we did this, and these numbers and so on, that's the boring part. And then he looks up and he says, now let me tell you the real deal. And that's the part that we need to listen to. Don't report on what he says from the teleprompter. Report on what he says when he's looking up and he's saying, I'm looking. I mean, you should know this as a comedian. Like
Yeah,
that
that's
creation of the intimacy with the audience.
That's what I was about to say. As a comic, we do the same bits over and over. We know where to tweak them. We know what audiences to use them for. We know when to go further with the bit, when to cut it off. That's exactly what he's doing. But what it sounds like you're saying is that, and I think this is the problem that they don't realize, is that the media, those assigned to covering Trump at these rallies, they go to all of the rallies. They travel with the president or not, but they go to all of the rallies. And so they see the same bits over and over. It's not new to them. But what I hear you saying is that they should cover it in a way that he did the MS-13 covering up the blonde woman bit for 15 minutes. He usually only does it for 7, but he went really long and detailed this time because it's repetitive.
Run a long clip of it. Let people encounter how strange this is. Let him see. It's a little bit, it's the same bit, right? But it's giving the appearance of authenticity.
But because it's not new, they don't want to report it in the Washington Post or CNN because it's not new. But in fact,
I don't think it's just because it's not new. I think it's what they reported, for instance, from Hershey also wasn't new. He told a joke about maybe I'll stay, I'll be here 4 more years, maybe 8 more years, maybe 16 years, right? And that was the line. Trump jokes about.
Somebody just logged into our Zoom.
It's so exciting. I've never had a hacked Zoom before.
Wasn't hacked. I know the guy, and it must have been an accident because he just texted me, and then I don't know how that wasn't private. Anyway, excuse me. Do you remember what you were saying right there?
You were I was disagreeing with you a little bit because you were sort of saying the reason they won't cover it is because they've seen the bits before, and I don't think that's the case. I think the reason they won't cover it is because they think it's just. Circuses, bread and circuses, and they think this is just for the entertainment. This is not the real stuff, because of course it's not talking about any policies. When he's describing at great length a murder, there's not a policy that comes out of that. The danger of Trump is actually bigger and more complex than the policy proposals and the mobilization of that kind of hate. I think also there's a little bit of just cognitive dissonance of you're a political reporter, right? You don't want to have a conversation with someone about their belief in cannibalism and pedophilia because, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be covering serious things.
Right.
So this person must be fringe. And now if I have to cover this, and I don't know how to cover this because that's utter bullshit, right? But I also have to somehow find a way to have a serious conversation and find out. So tell us more about the cannibal movie. You don't want to give it both sides, but it's like, look, this person believes.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, that's happening. I make the point in the article. I'm introducing you to some of these crazy ideas, and at this point, I'm thinking this is too much. You, reader, are probably thinking this is too much. And by the way, these very theories about a conspiracy theory around the Las Vegas mass shooting. That was on Tucker Carlson's show, which has 4 times the audience of this big glossy magazine that I'm writing in. That's not fringe. We are.
Yeah.
That's the mainstream.
That's such an important point. I don't know if you follow reporter named Judd Legum and Popular Info. Yeah. He had a really interesting piece today about how much this kid, what's his name from the Daily Wire, Ben, I don't know, he's super famous.
Shapiro.
Excuse me, Ben Shapiro. I'm so sorry, I couldn't remember your name there. But I should be able to, because the point is, he dominates Facebook, it. And I think Judd's reporting is you add up Washington Post, New York Times articles where there are way more articles than Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire, but yet Facebook is dominated by not only Ben Shapiro, a lot of conservative stuff. The point being, all of these kind of mainstream more reporting journalists with integrity who have editors and sources and would lose their job like yourself if you plagiarized anything. You don't have nearly the reach that Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro do. And therein lies the problem. How do we measure how many Trump supporters believe the crazy stuff that you're reporting? How do we prove that it's not mainstream, that it's fringe, and hopefully get more mainstream reporters to cover it the way that you're saying I believe they should?
I mean, The other thing is, in some ways, how many believe it? Enough.
Yeah.
Enough to put that man in the White House, which has happened, and enough even now. And he's back on his heels right now, which is, so we're just getting ready to do the exact same thing we did in 2016. Like, ha, 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 he's dumb. He doesn't have a chance and everything. He doesn't need a majority to win. We should remember that. Enough. And the idea that those movements, the way ideas move in movements, not just this movement, any movement, not everyone has the same idea, right? Not everyone is talking about cannibals. But if that's being presented, or if you have a U.S. congressman going on Tucker Carlson and saying the Las Vegas shooter, remember that terrible shooting, was actually the result of this nexus of terror. And then Trump gets up there and says, you know, the Mexican cartels are working with the Chinese, are working with the Democratic Party, it's all working together. There's room for there and disagreement. And this is where you get these people, these QAnon types, experiencing themselves as rational actors. Oh yeah, no, I'm a QAnon, my QAnon friend. Now, he thinks that JFK Jr. Is still alive and is going to be the vice presidential candidate in 2020. That's crazy. Trump's not going to put JFK Jr. on the ticket. He's too valuable doing what he's doing right now. See, there's room for disagreement, you know?
Yeah, it's not only room for disagreement, it's that there's no denunciation of their horrible beliefs by other people within the party, the movement, or the supporter of Trump. You know, a Trump supporter who supports Trump for his tax policies or judges should look at a guy who is saying something about JFK Jr. or cannibalism or pedophile and say, that's wrong. No, that's wrong, and that kind of idea needs to be drummed out. But that's not happening either. They're saying, "Oh, I haven't heard that."
I mean, that's the sort of the fantasy of Republican integrity that has been maintained ever since John McCain denounced that woman at one of his rallies who said that Obama is a Muslim terrorist, and McCain, remember, says, you know, I disagree with Obama, but he's an
terrible moment for John McCain amongst the conservative supporters. It was not a good moment for him. It's an amazing moment of integrity, most of people thought, but a bad moment, maybe, arguably, and a lot of Republican strategists and probably Trump noticed that.
Yeah, that's like that. You know, a lot of mainstream. We're not mainstream. We're fringe now. We say, now why don't the Republicans do that? And Republicans say because that lost, right?
Right.
That didn't win. You don't win by handing points.
So the shorter point: don't denounce the crazies because it didn't work for John McCain.
Yeah, Trump doesn't denounce the crazies. At one rally, there's a movement where you see rallies, these T-shirts that say "Trump tweets matter." I got to talk to some of the pastors, these religious folks who distribute these T-shirts. And I thought they meant it as a sort of a weird racist anti-Black Lives Matter joke. No, they meant it very literally. They said everything in a Trump tweet, the typos, capitalizations, everything is intentional. It's how he's communicating with us. It's like scripture. And so this movement began when the main guy, called the trumped up cowboy, wears a big black cowboy hat, found a group of boys in the woods in Kentucky.
I was going to ask you about Father Dave.
Flying them around the country. And I'm like, wait a minute, you guys are concerned about pedophilia, and you're telling me what were these boys doing in the woods of Kentucky? What about their parents? And I saw them. They're there. Eight boys I saw at one point, and one all air drumming to Phil Collins in the air tonight, wearing these Trump tweets matters. I'm like, this is such I kept on making that mistake of saying, okay, now this guy is out there. This is fringe. Well, the rally starts. Brad Parscale, Trump's campaign manager, comes out on stage, and then he points to the trumped up cowboy with his Trump Tweets Matter T-shirt and the kids. And he says, I see we have Trump Tweets Matter here. He says, beautiful story. Found them in the woods of Kentucky. Flies them around. And a crowd of 15,000 people cheer.
He knows his fans, and he knows what they believe, and he's signal boosting it. But just to be clear, then this is all in Jeff's article, which everybody should read at Vanity Fair. He goes in detail about the way they communicate and the way that they see the Trump tweets. But you're talking about this guy, Father Dave, who said he found 8 kids and he brought them,
Pastor Dave. Yeah, he found
Pastor Dave.
It was a trumped up cowboy who allegedly found the boys in the woods. Later, I later called him up and I said, can you just explain more to me? Like, what were they doing in the woods? What were you doing in the woods? And he actually was at a rally in Lexington, Kentucky. And he says, their parents know what we're doing. I said, well, what about school? well, some things are more important than school, like going to the same damn rally over and over and over and evangelizing for this idea. But that guy, again, if you met him, you wouldn't think of him as a fringe character. And as I would talk to more and more people, his ideas were not fringe. For instance, Pastor Dave actually would reject the cannibalism idea. He'd say that's too extreme. On another hand, he had an idea that was popular amongst Trumpers, which is that coronavirus is a punishment from God. And it is a chance for us, this is his term, to purge the nation. I'm like, purge? You're kidding. Are you talking about that horror movie? And he said, no. He says, this is part of the storm that is promised to us by QAnon.
You introduced me to a word in this article. I wasn't familiar with this word. I hate this word simply because of the way it's spelled. I had to look up its pronunciation, but the word is Gnosticism. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
What is, and it's spelled Gnosticism, which drove me crazy every time I had to read it in the article. Anyway, it's a thing. And it matters, and I need to know. I need you to tell everybody about it. Gnosticism.
So Gnosticism. Earlier I said in 2016 Trump's theology was prosperity gospel. Vote for me, you'll get rich. Now it's the Gnostic Gospel. This is this old Christian heresy. Goes back to the 2nd century. Have you ever heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Dead Sea Scrolls are Gnosticism. This was this alternative idea that that tracks very well onto Trumpism, that the people telling you about God, that's fake news. There is a real divine, but God is just a front, that the priests and the bureaucrats of the church and so on, that's the deep state, that's the swamp and so on. But you can get secret knowledge. You can tap into the real doings. And once you do that, you will understand that there are enemies everywhere trying to destroy the truth, right? But if you study and you trust, not so much, you don't need expertise, the coastal elites and all that, throw that out the window. You will encounter this world, and it's a world defined by contradiction, which is perfect for what Trump is. It's not that they're blind to the contradictions of the thrice merry man as the one, chosen by God. They look at the contradictions as proof of a deeper, more profound truth. And it's a truth that opens them up into a world of both secrecy, which makes you feel like I'm part of the initiative.
Exclusive.
The great man knows I'm in on this too. But also anyone who runs astray of it, it's easy. There's even a term for them. Jeff Sessions, the Gnostics would call him a waterless canal. Someone who seems like he's good and he's on your side, but he's actually part of this deep state.
Well, I've always called him an empty barrel, so I guess we have something in common. Just a little bit different.
You're a Gnostic too. I mean, there's going to be listeners out there who've read Elaine Pagel's best-selling book, The Gnostic Gospels, or know something. And there's a sort of a new agey, progressive, nice side of Gnosticism. And some people say, yeah, but in Gnosticism, the ultimate divine is feminine. So yeah, it's not a perfect match. What I'm interested in is the way in which Trumpism has embraced a theology of secret knowledge, and which, it means all media is out. I mean, that's a core part of it, is the hatred. We all know that Trump hates the press, or at least Trumpism hates the press. I don't think people understand how deep and how fundamental that is. That's the number one noise volume line at a Trump rally. You talk about God, people will cheer. You talk about guns, they'll cheer louder. You say, look at those scumbag CNN in the back there. And it is ecstatic.
Well, it's a perfect moment for a performer to have the antagonist in the room. You don't have the anti-gun people. You don't have the liberals in the room, although they probably believe that everybody behind the camera or working for as a journalist has those beliefs. But to have them there and to, you understand why that gets such a loud reaction. But it's such an important, the point that you're making is how much hatred they have for journalists performing journalism and how pernicious that is.
Yeah. Yeah, the journalists performing journalism, it's not just that they're bad at it. It is a fundamentally wrong activity. Journalism is now not just like, well, I disagree with that report. Journalism is almost now falling into the category of pedophilia and cannibalism. To do this is to turn your back on the secret knowledge that you have within, that Trump is telling you the truth.
And I after reading your article, something, an opinion of mine that I've been holding for years and hoping for, really, I think, started to fall apart. In that, what I've said is, and asked people, every reporter asks Trump supporters, how about now? How about now? Well, look what he just did. You still support him? The question being, will the fever break amongst the hardcore Trump supporters? And sure, for some, one thing is a deal breaker, another thing is. But for the people that we're talking about, that you're writing about, that you reported on, how it works based on, this is my opinion reading articles, it doesn't matter what he does or what mistakes he makes, because they're all by design. And specifically, in your article, you write about someone defending his typos and misspellings. And I thought that was really a profound thing, because it's such an obvious mistake, a misspelling. We all misspell things, and I'm the worst when it comes to Twitter putting out grammatical errors and stuff. I never want them to go out. Trump doesn't want them to go out that way, I don't think. But they excuse them, and they say they're done on purpose. My point being, there's nothing he can say or do for these people, because they believe it's all the, quote, mistakes, the typos, much less the gaffes, much less the contradictions. They're all by design.
Yeah. And that was the first time I heard that idea of the typos and the capitalizations being on purpose. I had this experience over and over. I'm like, oh, this guy is really out there. And then I would talk to another person. Oh, yeah. And I would realize that what I thought was fringe was widespread, and that this was on purpose. And it could range. There could be, again, room to disagree. Now, you might think that the typos and the capitalizations are on purpose because they are a secret code for Q. I disagree. I don't think there's so much a secret code. I know he does them on purpose because each one is in itself a clever joke owning the libs, right? And somehow we're insulted by his misspellings because we love spelling so much.
But do you think it's possible that your reporting, because it was done at the rallies, going back to talking about these people being the top fans, the biggest supporters, do you think that maybe your reporting is too generalized, too much generalizing, because these are the people that go to the rallies, and the rank and file Trump supporters are going to start to fall away because they don't believe this stuff? I'm not sure. I really don't know. And what I was keeping to say is, I interviewed this guy for an hour and a half the other day, a Trump supporter, and he was saying all the crazy things that you reported. And I decided, Jeff, I couldn't air it. I said, I can't air it because it's too crazy. But now, after reading your article, I was like, I think I have to post that conversation. A conversation, by the way, I bet you never heard this one, in which he did not recall, this is like a 35-year-old man, did not recall the Newtown shooting. Didn't know what I was talking about.
It's just gone. Huh?
He says that he was, later in a conversation, he says he was on drugs a lot during that time, but still, he didn't know what he was talking about, because that's a baseline question I ask people: do they believe it happened, and so on. Anyway, do you think you're reporting, maybe because it was done at the rallies with these people, that it's not the best case sample for the majority of Trump supporters, or do you think
I should qualify? I mean, my reporting, what I was setting out to do is what is happening at these rallies. How does the rally work? And it works as a ritual. So the rally is, as you say, by definition, it's for the hardcore. Does this encompass the suburban, Trump voter? New York Times had that coverage a little while ago about how Greenwich, Connecticut, which is, as aristocratic as it gets, has made its peace with Trump because they're making more money. Now, Greenwich, Connecticut, hedge funders are not going on about cannibalism. So no, it doesn't represent that. I was trying to sort of say what's happening at these rallies. That said, at every rally, you get a mix of the hardcore, and you would talk to people like, yeah, actually, I just decided to come over this afternoon because here it is in my community. And I remember in Louisiana, I'm talking to this one guy, and he's just a very, very ordinary guy. We're waiting in line to get some water, and there's a Democratic governor down there, and he's saying, it's a conservative Democrat, John Bel Edwards, and he's saying, yeah, I don't, he's not a bad man. I didn't vote for him. I don't support him. he's not a bad man. I mean, look, you've got to respect your opponents. I'm like, oh, okay, so here's a suburban voter. And I said, oh, so like you're not into, the stuff of like the Clintons. He says, no, the Clintons, that's different because they murder people. and it was just, there was these times where you would be sitting there with a group of lovely, lovely grandmothers, who were all there together, and it was sort of like a big adventure, girls' night out on a trip and so on. And they'd have a sweet conversation, and then it would turn. So I don't think it's universal at all. I think elements of it, though, are scattered throughout. And look, Trump is saying on the stage, if you support Trump, you are supporting a man who claims that the Democratic Party wants to execute babies. I mean, that's an actual claim. You're claiming you're supporting a man who in Phoenix or in Tulsa just the other night said 13 times that Biden is not really the candidate, that he's actually controlled or a puppet. He used those words, controlled or a puppet, 13 times by unseen forces. You are into the conspiracy theory if you're supporting Trump. Mitch McConnell, I think, knows better. He's just like, this is working out great for me. But I think this goes beyond the Hateful Dead, and it does go out into the suburbs.
Going back to just how reporters should cover it, and you mentioned Mitch McConnell. I mean, and the president himself. The next question that gets asked to the president or Republican senators should be, what will you say to the huge number of supporters that believe Democrats eat children, or whatever question they want to ask? Those questions should be asked to Republican senators and to the president himself. What do you say to your supporters who say this? Now, I know that those supporters, based on what the conversation we're having, will say he's just saying that to get you off his trail, and they'll excuse it. But that's not the point. The point that you're making, I think it's a really important point. These are still the questions that they should have to be on the record answering.
I think so. And you see a little bit more of that going on. I can't remember which tweet it was, but reporters sort of tried to do that with Republican senators as they were going to their lunch, remember?
Yeah.
Sort of holding up the tweets and saying, what? So there is that movement. And I mean, this has long been an issue for me, going back to the family that we were talking about. I always want reporters to say to Senator Chuck Grassley, was very powerful Republican from Iowa, very well documented, played an instrumental role in the near biblical destruction of Somalia by supporting massive increase in weapons for a dictator named Saad Barre, who was a lunatic. I mean, he may have thought he was God. He was a lunatic, but it didn't matter because he was willing to pray to Jesus with Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley would go over and pray with him and say, Senator Grassley, what is your position on the eradication of 100,000 Somalis? Are you for or against that?
Yeah.
All you got to do, the same thing with the Kill the Gays bill in Uganda. No one knows. Americans don't pay attention to Uganda. You had these American politicians, Jim Inhofe, who
he's the worst,
on the stage with Tulsa, say, and I remember at the time when I was doing that reporting, Rachel Maddow, finally, she did do this. She started calling his office and saying, are you for or against killing gay people? Oh, that's a ridiculous question. How dare you ask that question? We ask that question because you're supporting someone who's doing it. You're helping them do it. Answer the question. Are you, Mitch McConnell, do you or do you not think that Joe Biden wants to execute children? Because you're standing by the president who claims it's a fact. It seems like people are going to say that's gotcha reporting. It's not gotcha reporting.
No, it's not. These are the beliefs of many of his supporters. And
tell us about your beliefs, right? We just want to understand you, want to respect you. What are your beliefs? We want to hear all sides, right?
Kayleigh McEnany, Kellyanne Conway, they've been talking. They talk to the press almost every day. Seemingly recently, these are the questions that they should be asking them. But, they stick to this news cycle, this 24-hour news cycle, and only the new things that he says. But they should be out doing what you're doing and talking to his supporters and then asking the president's spokespeople. I spoke to a number of your supporters who believe that Democrats are eating children. What would you say? Let her scoff at it. Let her put it on the record. It's important because not everybody's reading Jeff Sharlet and Vanity Fair or The Family. That's why I said more reporters need to be covering the things that you're covering and taking them as seriously as you have been taking them your entire life. All right, I'm done ranting. But let me just ask you one more question here about your newest book, which is a real departure and very personal, and it's powerful and important. And I wanted to just talk about it. I want to get it and talk about it more, but it's titled The Brilliant Darkness, a Book of Strangers. Jeff, from what I've seen, it's just absolutely beautiful. And it's inspired, I think, from what I've read, by a health scare of your father's and then of yourself. Talk to me about it.
Yeah. It's called This Brilliant Darkness. It's about 2 years of my reporting life. Book ended by in 2014. My father, with whom I'm was very close, had a heart attack, and I began taking care of him. And along the way, sort of telling the stories of the people I met, and then I go out on a reporting trip to Uganda or Russia or wherever it was, and then come back and tell these stories. I wrote what I thought was the last line of the book. And I've never known this before. Like, that's it. That's the last line. That's a good last line. Pushed myself back from the desk. I was 44 and I felt a pressure in my chest, and it was my heart attack. And I remember thinking in the hospital, I'm like, if I get through tonight, what amazing symmetry this is. This is great. If I make it through. I did make it through. And then I sort of rewrote the book. So it's about other people's lives. It's about a lot about homelessness. The centerpiece of it is actually about something we're all thinking about right now: police violence, the LAPD killing of Charlie Africa Kunang, who was a homeless man who was held down to the pavement, pinned down, and killed by a contact shot, which is a gun pressed muzzle to bone right through the heart, on video. And no one ever held accountable. And that story, what I wanted to do, and with all these stories, and again, there's a little bit of media criticism in this, the way we're talking about it. And I'm starting to see this better reporting now. Back then, a friend of mine wrote a piece. He said, we talk about Black Lives Matter, but to the press, it seems only Black death matters. We don't hear about the lives that are lost. So I said, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find out everything I can. I'm going to go to Skid Row in LA, and I'm just going to basically move in and talk to all his friends. And then I found his family. Who was this person who was killed? We have seen that. I think we know more about George Floyd than we did about Michael Brown. And I think that to me is a sort of a hopeful moment, because that's getting us out of the immediate headline and saying, but what is the loss? What do we lose?
It's such a
and what do we have to fight for?
It's such a great and important point to give context to a person's life, and we're so desensitized to violence. I remember once interviewing the actor William H. Macy, and he really got upset when he started talking about, during the interview, the way that Hollywood glorifies violence. I remember asking him to name names, directors and actors, and he did. I think he said Quentin Tarantino. I think I asked him specifically about that, and what he said was just what you said. Granted, it was different. It was about Hollywood, but I think they go hand in hand in that you can just go kill 100 people in a movie, and it doesn't matter. You don't know anything about them. You feel no empathy for them because you didn't know anything about them. So Macy says, I don't mind violence on film, but the lives that are taken should have context and should be given meaning. But if Hollywood is desensitizing, and I'm not going to include video games in there, but I mean, like, if we're so desensitized to violence because the way it gets reported upon, that the person's not a real person, didn't have a real life, you're going out and giving context in this case and saying, no, these are the people. And you hear some of the victims saying, we will never be made whole. Don't forget about us when the news cycle's over, because our father's life was taken from us. We will never have him back. And those kinds of statements are powerful. And that's what you're doing here in this. And it's really important. So congratulations. I'm really excited to get it. How's your health? You recovered.
Healthier now than I have ever been, except that I have heart disease and an age of coronavirus, and so I'm staying at home and hoping other people will stay at home too. It just blows my mind that yesterday we have the highest caseload. We're not past this. We haven't even gotten to the heart of this storm.
What do you make of the journalism in general covering the pandemic? I mean, what would you? I don't have a specific question, but is there anything
the exact same thing? And in fact, a project I'm thinking about starting now is where we're not hearing nearly enough about the lives that are lost, right? So how can you be in New York City where whatever 20,000 people died? Yeah, that's over. I'm going to the bar now. And think about after 9/11, when we saw the faces of the dead. And I mean, the grieving was so powerful, right? And that grief is going to happen. If you put that grief off, it's going to hurt us, right? Right now, we're not doing that in the press. The press, I would like to see that beautiful New York Times front page. Where
I keep that in my studio.
Names.
Yep, I keep that.
I've got it right over here. They should be doing that every day. There should not be a day that passes without an obituary on the front page, as we did in the early stages of the Iraq-Afghanistan war. You would read all the time.
Right, that's
and then slowly
right.
Moved back, and then it was buried deeper and deeper in the paper, and then it would be just a little list of names down at the bottom. That's a way of normalizing death, which is just what William Macy is saying about Hollywood.
Well, yeah, and you tweeted the faces of COVID, and you're
that's a great Twitter account. People should follow that, Faces of COVID, where they are trying to do that. And I'm trying to. I'm thinking now of a book of obituaries, essentially, a book of just lives of ordinary people.
Unfortunately, you'll have a lot of content and a lot of different types of, I'm sure, fascinating, amazing people to whose lives you can document. But, you could also connect that, what you're saying, well, I think you already said it, but about Black Lives Matter, that therein lies the phrase that these lives were only covered when they were killed in the violence. But we never talked about their lives, as opposed to, which is why I always say, it drives me absolutely fucking nuts when I hear somebody say Blue Lives Matter, because my answer to that, and I've said it everywhere I can, is we know. When they die, they get a horse-drawn carriage and a 5-gun salute, and their families get hundreds of thousands of dollars in death benefits, and there's a profile written about them, and their story is written. When a police officer dies, we have a huge commemoration for their life. When a black person dies in their neighborhood, somebody throws their shoes up on a line, and that's the only way that's what we're trying to say. Document their lives. Sorry.
Well, and the vast majority of our, not the majority, but a huge part of our entertainment complex is dedicated to Blue Lives Matter, right? Oh, no one was thinking about the cops now, right? There was no cop. If only we had more representation of cops on television and in movies, they're just invisible to us, right? Fucking Blue Lives Matter. I can say this on Sirius, right? I wrote a piece for Harper's about that flag, the Blue Lives Matter flag, and you dig into it, and it is a straight up fascist flag. It really is. And I understand that not everyone who flies it is a fascist. There are people who are just sort of like, well, I'm a cop, or my brother is a cop, and so on. The flag was created as an anti-Black Lives Matter flag. It was I spoke to the creator. That's where it came from. It said, someone says Black Lives Matter. They made a flag to say no. That flag, when you see that Blue Lives Matter flag, you should read it as Black Lives Don't Matter, because that's what it was created to do. And then they start, anyway.
I like it. I like hearing that. Hearing the way that you phrase it is important. It's interesting. All right, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you joining me. I'm so glad that you're healthy and that you're out doing the work that you're doing. And everybody should go read this Vanity Fair piece. Buy all of Jeff's books. Follow him on Twitter. All that stuff is in the show links. And I hope to talk to you again soon, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Take care.
And that is Jeff Sharlet, at Jeff Sharlet on Twitter. Read him at Vanity Fair and get those books. Watch the Netflix series The Family, which is all inspired by his journalism. Okay, now coming up, I've got Jeff Jarvis, another Jeff. He is a professor of journalism at the Craig Newmark School of Journalism at the City of New York. He is a regular on MSNBC and other media outlets. He's a favorite of Howard Stern's, and he is a favorite of mine. Always a great conversation with Jeff Jarvis, and today was probably the best one we've ever had. On Twitter, at Jeff Jarvis. Follow him now. Here's our conversation. All right, there he is, one of my favorite people to talk to, the great Jeff Jarvis, who, by the way, huge in German media. Is that true?
The great Pete Dominic. I was on the Today Show of Germany. Hey, it was my chance for fame. Yeah.
Und Jarvis is joining us now.
And 2 seconds before, I said, there is a translator, right? And he said, yes.
So they went in German, and then you heard the English, and then you answered?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Yeah.
Oh, man, we got to get that clip. Make it go viral.
At 2 a.m. to do it.
Oh, dear. Oh, yeah, it's their
it's
morning.
Worth it for fame, We are We'll sell our souls. Let's put it that way. I was going to try to.
You're going to go harsher?
Mike Pence and call myself a version of a sex worker, but that would not be right. That would be wrong.
That's good. That would be inappropriate to say nowadays, and rightfully so, because it's insulting hardworking sex workers, and we would not want to compare their integrity to that of Mike Pence, who I'm not sure.
We need a word for Pence.
We do.
I don't know what it is.
So Jarvis
cannot be whore or prostitute, because that would be wrong.
Right. That's what we're saying.
Faust and Quisling aren't sufficient.
Well, it's the idea that he stands, as he did on Friday, there and talks about and reveres the president, our president, this and that cadence that he has. I said last week that the Pence name will go down in flames to the point that his grandchildren will have to switch his name. That's how terrible his fealty to Trump will look in history. I declare.
Well, God declared on Twitter.
What did God say?
The Tweet of God account declared, Mike Pence is going to hell. You have my word.
Oh, I love the Tweet of God. Well, there you have it.
There it is.
Well, that's okay. So I have a ton to talk about with you, Jeff Jarvis. First question. What is hashtag doom scrolling?
I'm just getting sick, my friend Pete, of people on Twitter who are telling me to stop doom scrolling and take care of myself. I can't stand nannies. I can't stand that paternalistic view because it says that we're going through all this bad news. Well, yes, there's racism, there's disease, there's death. Don't tell me to fucking calm down.
So doom scrolling is about that you're looking through social media timelines, specifically probably Twitter, and you're seeing all the bad things that are happening, and you're also sharing them.
It's bad for you. You should take some time out and take care of yourself.
Oh, God,
that's such a position of privilege and power.
How
right? Like you have a break from the world. Well, you don't have a break from the world if you have COVID or you're worried about your families, or I have a break from the world as a white man. But you don't have a break from racism if you're black.
Right.
And so it's all privileged white people who are saying, stop doom scrolling. Take care of yourself. Because obviously they're not affected by it. They're okay, but they think that the rest of us, it's the third person effect. I'm not affected, but you are pathetic.
I have nothing to add to that other than I too doom scroll, but I do take care of myself. Like I'm very conscious of the fact that something I'm reading is affecting me. And I think that's important for people to understand because we don't want people to turn away and just drown in apathy because ignorance is bliss. We want you to pay attention, but we do want you to take care of yourself. And so what I do, I know that it's affecting me. I admit it. I say, this is upsetting me. And that's right. And then I will do, but I will acknowledge it. But if it gets really bad, and it does often every day, I generally go take a break. I take a break. That's
find the gin.
Did you say gin?
Gin.
Whiskey.
Whiskey.
And gym. GYM, although they're closed. I exercise, but mostly I find the nature. I go outside in the garden because the news is so hard, but I don't go away from it, and I don't stop fighting injustice and from my studio, and I don't stop thinking about it. I don't stop doing everything I can to be engaged, to teach my kids, and to stay civic minded because it's terrible out there. This is where we're at right now. This is where we're living. This is the times we're living in.
Move away from it. It's the same thing that upset me. So Unilever just announced they're going to drop all their advertising on Facebook and Twitter, and people were applauding because
so did Verizon.
Against Verizon too. And it's not. They don't have any plan to fix social media. What they're doing is walking away from controversy. They're walking away also from Black Lives Matter. They're walking away from the voice of the public because they don't like to be near controversy. They don't like to be near upset. They don't like to be near news either.
Wait, who? The people reading social media or these companies that are leaving?
The companies.
You're criticizing them for not advertising on Facebook?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Because of the way they're doing that. Hey, it's a business decision. If you don't want to advertise there, don't advertise there. Nobody's going to force you. But Unilever didn't just do Facebook, they did Twitter. And they said through the end of the year, read the election. So they don't want to be around the discussion of democracy. They don't want to be around the upset and tumult we have right now. I'm not suggesting, again, that I'm any ally of Facebook or Twitter here. though Facebook did contribute money to my school, and I received nothing personally from any of the platforms. End of disclosure. But I think that the way they're doing it is it's turning into a moral panic about what they think of as technology and social media, and it's going to lead to the death of Section 230. And it plays right into the hands of Trump and the GOP in the Senate, which is trying to go after social media. And what they're really going after is the public conversation, and that pisses me off.
Okay, well, that is not a point of view that I've heard, and it's just another great reason to be in conversation with you. And I want to talk about that probably for an hour, but I don't think I know enough about it, and I'm going to read about it and try to understand all of the different pros and cons about this. But let me just ask one question so I can try to understand what you're saying. Is it okay for Unilever or Verizon or Dove soap to advertise on a white supremacist's TV show?
I'm not saying that at all. And I'm saying it's their choice as to where they advertise. But when they choose to pull out, what they're pulling out is part of a campaign that says social media is bad.
Got it.
And when you're saying social media is bad, what you're really saying is we, the people who are on it, are bad. And that's what bothers me. And that campaign is going after Section 230. I recommend highly Jeff Kossoff's book, The 26 Words That Created the Internet, if you want to know about that.
Okay.
And they're going after the public conversation in a way that I think is going to have a deleterious effect on freedom of expression.
This leads us to another really important development of last week, where we heard a lot of conservatives, including the great Ted Cruz, who I can't say enough about his character and how he inspires me.
Because he's a rock, wouldn't you say? He stands by what he believes in, including his own family, and doesn't let anybody insult them or cause them harm, or the nation.
He doesn't let anybody call his wife ugly or accuse his father of killing John F. Kennedy.
Ted wouldn't do that. Everybody loves Ted, you know.
Ted Cruz. He made a video in his awful face and squirrely voice going, "I'm going over to Parler." And we heard a lot of other people talking about it. It's the first time I heard the word Parler, the social media network, last week. And it's a whole bunch of conservatives announcing they're going to this social media network that does not in any way censor their speech. You could say anything apparently on this network. So we're seeing kind of an exodus from Twitter, which is maybe too much of a word. And I want to know what you think of all that.
People. But have you read the spiel on the Parler homepage?
No.
It is as if
does it say Heil Hitler? And that's it.
It's as if translated in a more modern reference from the Russian. Parler, it says, is an unbiased social network. Is unbiased social media. Try that again. Stop. Rewind.
And
Parler is an unbiased social media. Now, media is plural, and social media makes no sense, but we'll get past that. Parler is an unbiased social media focused on real user experiences and engagement. Our content is moderated based off the FCC and the Supreme Court of the United States, which enables free expression without violence and a lack of censorship. That makes no sense. It's just bad English. It doesn't say anything. It's based off of the FCC and the Supreme Court. What does that mean? The FCC has nothing to do with the internet.
Well, let me take a step back, because what is your thesis? Explain to people what you're a free speech absolutist. You're arguing everywhere that we should not have to be censored on social media.
No, I'm not arguing that.
What are you saying?
I'm not arguing that. The social media platforms' right to choose is their exercise of freedom of expression. And so they have a perfect right to do what they want to. I think Zuckerberg is messing up. We've talked about that last time we talked.
Yep.
I think he's messing up right now. I think he's doing the wrong thing, but it is his right to choose that. I think Twitter did the right thing when it came to marking Trump's tweets. I think it did the wrong thing by eliminating political advertising, but it's their right to do that. And now what you see is basically Trump and the GOP in the Senate are saying that Facebook and Twitter should be sued out of existence if anyone takes down their hate speech.
That's what you're saying.
Neutral.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Sorry, I didn't do a good job of saying it clearly.
No, that's not true. I've read fragments of tweets. I want to make sure that I was clear with what you are arguing. So that's
I am a First Amendment absolutist, but the First Amendment just controls government's actions, doesn't control companies. And what I don't want is to see government stepping into the speech of the platforms. There's a case that just happened in Italy where Facebook took down a fascist group's homepage, right? And everybody's screaming around the world, take down the fascists, Facebook. Well, guess what happened? The court just is forcing them to put it back up. That becomes imposed speech by government, which is even worse. Right now, get your German accent back. That's what happened.
Taking down the Facebook. So what are you saying, that Facebook should be allowed to take down fascist posts, racist posts?
Or not take it down, as is their want. And the market of its users should be the more important voice.
Got it.
Right? And now what we see happening is that Section 230 gives the power to platforms in the United States to take things down at will, which I hope leads to a better public conversation. It also protects them. If I put on something awful on Facebook, it's not Facebook's fault, and Facebook can't be sued. So those trying to take away Section 230 would say, no, for what Jarvis says on Facebook, don't sue Jarvis, sue Facebook because they got more money.
Right.
Go after them.
Got it.
And then that is going to put a chill on speech. So that Facebook is going to say, oh, you can't talk about this or this or this or this or this. And going back to Unilever is basically saying, yeah, as long as you have controversial stuff, as long as you allow that on your platform, we're not going to give you any money. So what does that do to freedom of expression for the citizens? We finally have, we the people, I mean, I've always had a platform. You have a platform, right? I had a newspaper behind me and you have a microphone in front of you. But most people don't have that privilege, and they finally have a voice in social media. And what's happening is that the powers of old are joining together to shoot down what's new. I just reread a book, nice academic book. I like to act like an academic, called Media at War from Gwyneth Jackaway, written in 1995. And it is about what happened when radio came along and newspapers tried to shoot them down. And newspapers had this view of their sanctity. We are the only ones who can bring news to the world. This new thing, radio, has voice. That's going to confuse people. That's going to bring them down bad roads. They don't know what they're doing. Government, you must control them. In fact, government, you should take them over. And then newspapers said, oh, if radio is controlled by government through the regulation we asked for, that means they don't really have freedom of expression, so they shouldn't be reporting the news of Congress because we can't trust them because government can control them. So it was all just a self-interested way for old print to kill the new medium. That's what's happening today. But the difference is radio was, people like you, the hired hands. Social media is everybody. And so what's happening now is people don't want to hear from everybody. And I just want to remind people that when you dismiss Twitter and Facebook, you dismiss Black Lives Matter.
How so? That's their main.
That is where they could finally be heard. That voice has always been there.
Well, so this brings to question the debate, and I was at an actual debate, Intelligence Squared debate. It's fascinating about social media. Is it more a power of good? I think get the motion to spread democracy or not. And man, was that a fascinating debate. And I didn't know what to think or what to believe. Both sides make great points. Not Robert McNamara. What's his name? One of the original Facebook funders, investors. McNamara is his last name. Anyway.
Oh, Roger McNamee.
McNamee.
Gag me.
Oh, yes. Gag me. You're not a fan.
Roger's a nice guy. I know Roger.
Yeah.
Roger's shtick is,
go ahead.
I used to advise Mark. I was his mentor. Then he stopped calling me. And so now I'm going to go and attack. And he says that the root of all evil is that Facebook has an algorithm that chooses what to promote. As if a radio station, as if you as a host don't choose who to have on.
Right.
As if the New York Times doesn't choose what to do. It's
I smell a future debate I'll be hosting.
So Roger drives me nuts because now he's just blaming everything on the evils of social media and the algorithm.
I still don't know what to think, but I do feel like a lie can travel so far, so fast. Not even a lie, like worse than a lie, a thing that didn't happen, can't happen, especially now with the pandemic. That's always been a problem, but now it's within seconds. As soon as you tweet it out, millions of people know you can never put that back in the bottle, and so. The way that social media works and operates and the technology that we have that allows it to travel so far around the globe so fast, it convinces me that it's not, as you say, the best. It's a really important thing for movements. In this case, Black Lives Matter. You can talk about Egypt. You can talk about Hong Kong. It's very important for those, but it's also important way or a very valuable way to spread the conspiracy, the crazy batshit nuts idea that is spreading fast that Democrats eat babies. A lot of people believe that, Jarvis, because of how bad social media is.
So just earlier today, you were agreeing and
Crush me.
With Christopher Mims, who's Wall Street Journal, was a good guy, smart guy, good reporter. No. Even though he's Wall Street Journal, even though it's owned by Murdoch, but we'll leave that aside. His tweet was saying that the deeper story of our age is that cognitive antibodies to propaganda, conspiracy theories, and misinformation take a long time to develop, are chronically underdeveloped in many grown humans, mind you, not me, third person effect, and even the best informational immune system is never complete. To which I responded on Twitter, because Twitter is Twitter, what patronizing paternalism. I have some broadsheets about the witch trials to show you.
Yes.
Right? Print did the exact same thing. And what happened? We call it antibodies if you want, and it's never complete. But we as a society figure this out. So I'm going to refer you to the famous speech by John Milton, Areopagitica. It's very long. It's very hard to read. I read it for people and masticated it and spat it back out on my blog.
I'm already uninterested because you've just said 4 words that are all too much for me. But
John
go ahead.
Milton, Areopagitica, that's 3 words.
And then the mastitic word, I've never heard it. I think it was.
Okay. So Milton wrote this speech. It was actually a pamphlet in, I think it was 1644, arguing against licensing of books in England. And his argument was that if we have this paternalistic attitude that we're going to protect the people from this bad stuff, then you're not exercising the minds of those people. Truth is a choice you make. And it comes after you do indeed hear the batshit crazy loony stuff, right? So yesterday, who was it? Somebody, I can't remember on Twitter, there was this lady who was testifying in some kind of local thing where she was saying that the mask is taking away my ability to breathe and God's green acre.
Yes.
And God's going to come and get you. And
the devil, right? Citizens arrest. I played it on the podcast. It was amazing.
So
she's now,
you're see what you're spreading? See what you're doing?
Amazing. Amazingly crazy. And the thing that people haven't heard, this is just breaking. Trump actually just appointed that woman as Secretary of Labor, which I think is an important.
I thought it was Health and Human Services.
That would have been funnier.
So I had nothing worse than an edited joke.
No, that's good. It's
So
good.
somebody on Twitter, I can't remember who, because it all goes out of the brain, said this is terrible, and Facebook should take this down, and Twitter should take this down. No. That imagines that you don't know she's an idiot, and I don't know she's an idiot. I know she's an idiot. Now, some people don't. Okay, there have always been idiots. But seeing the depth of the idiocy in America right now is part of our story right now. And this paternalistic idea that we're going to clean it all up for you and like a Holiday Inn toilet, put a safe for your consumption, what do they used to say? Sanitized for your protection label on the world is ridiculous. So yeah, is there junk on Twitter? There is in life.
Your argument resonates with me. I can't. I know I'm way out of my depth, even mounting.
No.
I am. This is your bailiwick, and I appreciate and respect you for it. But I'm going to try one more time. And the only way to say this is that this time it's different. What I hear you saying reminds me of those who argue and use history and very effectively, and they're not wrong and you're not wrong when they're talking about technology and the increase of technology will put people out of work. The horse and buggy, the car, comes, the cotton gin, the computers, everybody.
The looms.
The looms. Yes, technology will replace people. And that's a concern that smart people have always had, but never has. It's never proven. It's always created more jobs. Well, I think this is different in terms of the economy. And more importantly, I think it's equally as different in terms of the speech argument that you're making, because this time it's different than all the historical references you so wisely made, because it spread so much faster. And
so does the truth.
I don't know
immediately.
Where?
And by the way, when was the last time you saw a correction on the CBS Evening News?
No, corrections are the journalistic responsibility, but they're not very effective once it's out there. For example, I'll give you an example. Shake Shack with the NYPD cops. How many people you think know the truth about that? Probably.
It got corrected pretty quickly. It got
but
debunked pretty quickly.
Does that resonate?
If they want to believe that, they're going to believe it.
Right.
Yeah. And so the core problem there is not that it got out in the first place. It's that those people are not educated.
But I understand, and I agree with that. But the fringe, I believe, I was talking with Jeff Sharlet about this week, I believe that the fringe is the mainstream. The truth is the fringe now. That because of all of this. Now, dunk on me.
Okay. So that fringe became mainstream enough to elect the fringiest idiot we've ever had in this country.
Yes.
True.
Yes, that's
However,
why.
it was not a majority, not even by a long shot, right? And it was by our systemic racist system that was made to be nice to slave states, the Electoral College and the Senate, that was made possible. And so the country really wasn't going to the dogs. The problem is now, if you look at our industry, media, what do they pay attention to constantly? Trump space, Trump space, Trump space, Trump space. They give them far more attention than they deserve. And so it's the bad judgment of media, I will argue, that is amplifying the wrong voices.
We can talk about that, and I think that obviously all those things are true. But here's my one final argument. You're talking about a minority of Americans voted for Trump as an argument to what I'm saying is the fringe is now the majority and the truth and facts are the minority. I agree with that. I agree that it's the minority that believe that. But let me throw out another idea. This will be very easy to measure.
Dunk on me.
No, I will not. I can't. But I'm trying to dribble up close to you. But I feel like you'll swat all these shots away. That being said, another thing you can measure, like an election, is vaccinations. So I ask you, Jeff Jarvis, when the vaccine comes out, and let's say best case scenario, it's effective, we will need a very high percentage of Americans to get that vaccine. We don't have even a very high percentage of people wearing masks. And you're the one who just tweeted out a statistic from a study that said if 95% of Americans wore masks, then by October 1st, you would save 330,000 lives. They aren't wearing masks. They're not going to get vaccinated because they're fucking crazy, because I guess I'm saying because of social media's spreading like wildfire that all this stuff is unsafe and it'll kill you. The truth is not winning, and people are dying.
I put the fault a little differently. I put it first on my business, on media, that if we don't have the trust of the public, then what did we do wrong to do that?
Fair enough.
I think we're trying to do things in an old way. If we just shove out facts, we'll be okay. I think we've got to reinvent journalism with lessons from psychology and neuroscience, and cognitive science, and anthropology and other fields that have a different and better understanding of the public and why they believe what they believe. I put the fault on education, not educators, but on the fact that we don't respect education in this country, and we're seeing the fruits of that now. And so thus I end up putting, it's a cycle. I put the fault on the government officials who pulled back money and resources from education. What's going to happen right now? We're going to see that universities, especially public universities like mine, the City University of New York, which is the university of the people, is going to get hit badly on budget stuff just when it's needed most to educate the people who have been dying because they're essential workers without the education to get better jobs to get out of this path. And we're not going to do that. We're going to get cut back. John Jay College just laid off more than 400 adjunct teachers. That's not the way out of this mess.
Since you're talking about journalism schools, let me move on, and we'll revisit this debate, and I'll try to get smarter about it and ask better questions. I'll go back and watch that Intelligence Squared debate, too, and ask you to see what you think. I'd really like to know what you think. You have homework. Go watch your boy Roger McNamee.
Is it on the final?
So a bunch of journalism schools put out a statement basically saying, reaffirming, they say, the critical role of journalism in our democracy and responsibility as journalism educators to confront and challenge racism in our communities and in our institutions. You saw the statement and said, number one, why hasn't my journalism school asked to say something in this statement, be part of it. And number two, bullshit.
It's fine, but it was more blather, blather, blather. Remember the old "more mush from the wimp" headline that got into the Boston Globe years ago? It was mush. It's talk about racism, and it's time to get past the rhetoric. And I say that as someone who hasn't figured out how. I don't know how either. But it is time to put requirements on ourselves as white people with privilege to figure out what to do. And so there are a few examples I've seen. One was because what the statement of the deans didn't do is it didn't identify the systemic racism in journalism itself. Who's going to do that? Who's going to hold journalism to account? You would hope it would be schools. They didn't do that. They didn't grapple really beyond some, we're going to be better rhetoric with the systemic racism that is in schools and journalism schools. And I include mine as a wonderfully diverse school, but we have a lot of work to do, believe me. It didn't have any specifics to be held accountable for. So as a model, there was a statement by the staff at the Oxford Internet Institute, a bunch of very smart people, and they put out this long statement that had specific sins to talk about, specific goals, specific people to be stewards of it.
All right.
And one of them, for example, was saying that we, the Institute, should examine our fields, the multiple academic fields, and our own department at the university for the anti-blackness and be public about this. And we should do it by this date. That's specific. That's doing something specific. We should change our hiring process in this way, in this way, in this way. That's the kind of talk that we need to start having now.
All right. So I jumped to a conclusion by saying that statement was bullshit, but you're saying it needs to go. There needs to be a lot more. There needs to be a lot more actions than words from all of us. And also being humble and saying, I'm not sure exactly what it is. I just know that we need to do stuff, not just put out statements and say stuff, which is.
I'm going to go back, if I may, to my wonky Gutenberg stuff. And I haven't written this post. Let me play this out on you.
All right.
In Buffalo or wherever. Shows New Haven. That's where they played it. I wonder whether what we're seeing now is the Black Reformation, capital R. I wonder whether what print enabled Martin Luther to do, which was to take this new tool, not deterministically, but just to take advantage of it, to exploit it, to say there was all this corruption in the institution of the church, and I'm going to use this to expose that and to have a public dialogue about it and to force the issue and ultimately to force a reformation and a revolution. And there came a critical mass point where that was possible. Jan Hus, 100 years before, didn't get so far. He didn't have a press. He got burned at the stake. It all died down. Right?
So sorry for laughing at that, Jan.
Yeah, I know. Poor Jan. So Luther had the tool to be able to hold the institution to account. Now, this is why I defend the internet and defend social media, even if it's in bad hands, if it's in not the best hands like Facebook's. Now, African Americans have the tool to have the hashtags and the platforms of those of Living While Black to inform us white people what they have been going through, that if a white person calls the police on a black person, it could be a sentence to death. Right. They have the tool of Black Lives Matter to exercise their right not only to speech, but to assembly and to get together and act. And women have the tool of Me Too to force changes that should have been made years ago and were ignored by media run by old white men who look like and act like me. So
you do look exactly like Matt Lauer. Sorry.
Oof.
Sorry.
Oof.
Sorry.
Oof.
Go ahead.
Ouch.
That three. Well, so is what you're saying? I don't know if you were. I mean, I really love everything that you just said, and it's encouraging and inspiring to hear, especially with the historical context. But is what you're saying that this is the critical mass right now? Yes. The summer of 2020, Black Lives Matter movement, in correlation with the pandemic and Trump presidency and white supremacy and all of it. This is it. This is the moment, because if that's what you're saying, I don't know what to say. I want that to be right. I'm hearing from influential.
It's our choice as to whether to make it the moment or not.
Very well said.
Now, listen, mind you, I am old enough myself.
If you want it to be this moment, then don't sit back and watch.
Exactly.
You're old enough,
and that's what Nicole Hannah-Jones is saying to us this weekend in the Times yesterday about reparations and defining reparations. Right? It's now, mind you, I'm old enough, my son, to be, my hair is white and you have none, to have been there in the 60s. The tail end, but the 60s, right?
Yeah.
And we thought we were virtuous. We thought we were wonderful, and then we blew it. And we all became hedge fund people, right? So, we were
that would happen.
Yeah, Abby Hoffman, famous banker. So maybe I'm being, as is my want, too optimistic.
Well,
but it is this moment now is the critical mass to it's a choice. It's always a choice, but it's a choice now.
To be fair, I've heard far blacker people than you say this. And as we do, we follow the lead of the people who understand, who are discriminated against, and we listen to them. And yes. I'm listening to them, and you're listening to them, and they are saying what you're saying, a lot of them. But I think it's really important, the point that you made, just to reiterate it. If this is the moment, then we have to be a part of it. We have to be an active part of the movement. We have to do something. We can't just sit here, which leads us to you and I plotting in the shadows for the past couple of weeks, meeting at a secret establishment with a secret handshake. All right, the last two things.
No handshake. No handshake.
A secret foot tap. Jeff and I have not seen each other. We've just been talking about trying to just have a conversation about what we can do with what little fire we have to breathe, to put pressure on specifically the cable networks, even more specifically MSNBC, to hire black people in prime time. Specifically, that's what we're asking for. You wrote up a great and powerful and well-written piece that we haven't, that you just ran by me. But it really is excellent, and I think it's still worth posting, even though there are rumors that Joy Reid is going to get the 7 p.m. spot, 7 Eastern, on MSNBC. The Wall Street Journal reporting this over the weekend, or rather at the end of the week. But it is a rumor. It's not confirmed that this is happening. Nonetheless, why does it need to happen? How much of a difference will it make? Why do we want what we can do, influence media to some extent, for the powers that be to put a person of color in prime time? How important is that?
Credit where it's due. You, the one who started this, you called me. You said the time is now, and the time is for us to put what little we have on the line to say so.
And I called you from the garden place where I was buying basil. So I'm very serious about this movement. I'm trying to discredit my passion. Like, hey, Jeff, we should do something. And, oh, look at this basil.
Do you have any mulch? So how do I get rid of aphids?
And white people in prime time. How do we get rid of many people that look like us in prime time? Joy's been doing these amazing panels for years with mostly black people on the weekends and getting great ratings. Why isn't it happening in prime time?
She's brilliant.
Yep.
The primary thing that bothers me here is that if we are going to win this holy war we are in this November, and it is going to occur on the backs primarily of African-American women. And we, by which I mean liberals, white people in sympathy, the Democratic Party, and the cable networks are taking them for granted. And we're not hearing their voices. That's the whole point of George Floyd. This has been going on for decades or centuries. We didn't know it because newsrooms and media companies were run by old white men who, again, look like me, but not necessarily like
the abuse, like the discrimination, the racism has been going on for decades, but we didn't know it because the executives weren't putting it out there. They weren't printing it.
Part of their lived experience.
They're more likely to print a white person being beaten up by a black person to make it seem like that was the issue. I mean, not only were they not printing it, they were printing the opposite story, I would argue.
So I was trying to write this post too, which I also haven't put up yet, but I'm trying out all my stuff on the road with you.
Let's go.
I have a confession to make. When I was a nipper in the business, as an intern at Chicago Today, a paper that had no tomorrow, I came in on Sundays. It was closed on the weekends. It was the Chicago Tribune's afternoon paper. And my job as an intern was to go through the police blotter of stuff that had piled up. And I was told to take anything that happened on the South Side and spike it. That is to say, the black.
Wow.
Right? And I did protest. I remember protesting and saying, no, that's story. No. I was told, sheep it out. I did it. All those years I was told not to capitalize B in black. I did it. Right. And that was there was a tiny, the capitalization of black is a tiny microaggression, but it's a microaggression. It's an insult. And so that's the way media has been structured. And the only way we're going to get past this is to share power. And on TV, sharing power means sharing time in prime time. And we cannot take for granted and take advantage of people of color at the voting booth and in the protest march and not give them this voice on TV. So that MSNBC, which I watch more, I pretty much watch all the time because I'm doom scrolling by watching it. You were a little more Catholic, lowercase c, and watch CNN as well. They have spectacular African-American experts on, right? Eddie Glaude Jr., Maya Wiley, Tiffany Cross, Michelle Sindor.
Although they got Ellie Mistal and Dr. Jason Johnson on the bench. Get them off the bench.
Exactly what's wrong,
They're
too.
like two of the best right there.
Passionate voices now. So they have that, but these are people who are guests. They're guests in the house. It should be their house. And so it is time, damn it, to do this. So we were ready to go and have a good thumping, violating radio rule, thumping the desk now.
No, they're good for that.
And then we saw the report that Joy would get the show. So good, and let's continue to put pressure on to make sure that happens.
It's also your confession, I think, I just want to highlight, because it's important when white people talk about what they have seen, what they have done, what they have been asked to do. That is the role that we should always play. What you just said was so honest and valuable, to admit these are the things I was told to do. Most white people don't admit those things. That is a huge part of what I think our responsibility should be, is to share our experience, to share, including our own ignorances, and to not be defensive, by the way, when we're having these conversations. But specifically what you just shared and that confession was very valuable.
That's the hardest lesson to learn. As I see in myself my defensiveness over my entire life. No, I'm not racist. I'm okay.
Yeah,
it's not me.
I'm open-minded.
It's time to get past that.
Yeah,
it's time to say we're part of a system. We've caused harm, and to take responsibility for that.
Well,
at the same time, not making it about us again.
Yeah, that's right. But we're part of a system and we've caused harm. But I would focus more on the former, because we're part of a system that teaches us, or that unteaches us, that never teaches us. We look at a statue, we see a statue, and go, oh, that guy must be great. We don't know that he was a Confederate general, or we don't know about all of the systemic racism throughout history because it was never taught to us. We're wired in such a way, and society and culture is wired in such a way, that we didn't even realize so much of this stuff. So don't be defensive, because there's so much to learn or unlearn. Yes. And finally, I have a confession to make as well, and that's I sleep with a pillow between my legs. It doesn't compare to your confession.
Do I want to know that?
It wasn't brave, but I felt like I needed to say something, to put it out there, to liberate a truth. And I'm going to whine about my sleeping. I just started a CPAP machine, and it is a device of torture. Oh, I've got an hour of material about it, sir. I was prescribed one, and I said I'd rather die.
Yeah.
I'd rather die than wear a mask to bed at night.
It's awful.
Is it helping?
I'm trying. No,
I hear it helps. I hear it gives you great sleep.
That's what I was supposed to get. No, I have a pulse oximeter, which I'd had anyway, and I'm so self-centered. So I had been checking to see what my sleep was like, right? How often was my oxygen going below? And by the way, put a mask on, your oxygen won't go down, people.
But, there's a rumor out there that the mask is going to kill you because you're not breathing.
Might as well be COVID. So I have the pulse. I have lots of data. And I do have some problems, like for the first 2 hours of sleep, I have some problems, right? Then I put the mask on, it's worse. I take the mask off and I'm okay.
That ain't right.
So, yeah.
I did that sleep study to find out where you go and you stay at a place. Did you do that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I got kicked out.
Because we're snoring too loud?
I know. I kept buzzing the guy and asking him to read to me. And then he's like, we don't do that. And then they finally kicked me out when I asked him to scratch my back. I told him I couldn't fall asleep. I said, I can't fall asleep. He said, sir, you're going to need to get so I don't know if I have a problem or not, because I didn't make it through the night. All right. Final question on COVID, Jeff, which is, you pay such close attention to the news and to the science and the journalism covering the news and the science. And now it's hard to understand how to look at it, because everybody has their own framing in terms of what's been going on in the world and how the media really is framing things. And obviously what happened in New York, and media is centered in New York. We had this massive outbreak, obviously, in New York City, and we were shut down and nobody went outside. Nobody's wearing a mask and social distancing, and it flattened the curve after thousands and thousands of people lost their lives. And we should never forget about them. And news should memorialize them on the front pages every single day. But Now it's really spiking in Arizona and in Florida and in Texas. And the president of the United States doesn't care. He's not doing anything about it. However, on Friday, the band did get back together for the first time in a long time. Fauci and the Birxes, I think is their name, including...
It used to be Fauci and the Dixie Birches, but they've taken Dixie out.
They did. It was a very controversial and divisive thing. I don't want to get back into that because I'm not sure we'll agree. But the lead man, of course, the front man, is the guy we started bashing, and we'll finish with bashing him, Mike Pence. He's in charge, I believe, of the task force. What if anything, did we learn? And let's pretend that you were able to see the entire press conference and predict what was said.
I saw enough to know that it was going to be fairly worthless. And Pence just started off again praising Trump for stopping travel from China and having done everything that would have been far worse. Isn't it wonderful? And the president asked us to reconsider, considering all this bad stuff is going on. And basically what they did was they threw all the young people in the country under the bus and said, can you young people stop going to bars and stop going out partying and stop doing this stuff because you're going to kill grandpa and grandma and mom and dad. So, can you stop that? After we opened all this stuff up, and then we're going to open up all the colleges and the universities, and we're going to act like you're not going to go to parties, and you're not going to go back home, you're not going to go to town, and you're going to isolate, you're not going to get sick, and we're fooling ourselves. And it's dangerous.
Is what you're saying is that one of the narrative that's forming is that a number of these states, everybody shut down at least for a period of time. Is my right?
To some extent, different extents.
And then we heard, and most infamously, the what is his name? The guy in Texas, Lieutenant Journal, the lieutenant governor, the second in command. With that asshole, he's got the same name as somebody else famous. But he was saying basically, listen, if some old people got to die. That was at the very beginning of the reopening screaming. Anyway, is what you're saying is that states that shut down that are now seeing spikes, it's because they opened too much too early?
Yes.
Do you feel confident with that? That's what you're hearing?
Absolutely. The data is there. The data are there. We know how this spreads better. I went and got my hair cut the other day. You like it? Is it nice? Are you jealous?
Must be nice. Must be nice.
Yeah. And I felt okay about that because we have enough data to know how it spreads. And so I did it, right? So like 3 months ago, I would have said it's irresponsible. Now I don't think so. We know more. We know enough to know that a bar and a restaurant is a bad place. We know enough to know that a church, that no matter what it installs in it, is a place where people are going to get the disease. And they went ahead and did it in these states. And by the way, so far we haven't seen a big jump in those places where there were demonstrations. Where we've seen it is where the generally Republican administrations opened up out of some kind of anti-scientific idiocy.
It would seem, and I don't know if you've seen any research on this, that outside is a lot harder to get it. Protests are all outside than inside.
I even saw today.
Is that true? I mean,
yeah, it is. It is. That's what the data shows so far. And so I have a COVID Twitter list I'll plug. If you go to bit.ly/COVID Twitter list, it has 600 experts in there.
I'll link that in the show notes today as well. Yep.
And the Independent Sage Group in the UK, which is their independent science advisory board, independent of government, even advised this. I hadn't seen this before. If you have to go visit somebody who's a little bit vulnerable, walk side by side. Don't face each other. Even that, right? Wear masks.
Yeah.
Be outside if you can. Walk side by side. These are the things we're learning as we go. Now, no matter how well you do it, all you're doing is reducing your odds. That's the best you can say.
Well, it's scary. It's back. It seemed like it was dying down. It was flattening, but it is back. And this time, the president seems to be paying even less attention to it. And it's just so hard that we have the worst public health situation, epidemic in our lifetimes, and the president is completely unprepared. Which is, by the way, not uncommon. I think George W. Bush was unprepared for Katrina. But guess what? He wasn't uninterested once it happened. He got interested real quick because it was horrible. And he did all kinds of bad things. But he wasn't ignoring it once everybody was watching. This president is literally ignoring the problem. He's doing nothing. He's saying there's not a problem.
He's pulling back testing and arguing. Basically, if you don't get tested for pregnancy, you can't get pregnant.
Right. It's a
so
bizarre
that's what he's
thing.
Doing, and he's just an idiot.
Jeff Jarvis, always great to be in conversation with you. I've taken up enough of your time. I really appreciate it. So valuable.
Always a pleasure.
Love talking to you.
To be here with you, sir.
I'll talk to you again soon, I hope. Okay, that is all I've got for you on today's show, episode 136. Thank you very much to my guests, Jeff Sharlet and Jeff Jarvis. I hope you'll follow both of them on Twitter. Tell them you heard them here on the show and support the show with a paid subscription. I do this show each and every day. I cannot do it without your support. I know there's all kinds of different media outlets that you can subscribe to and support, and I'm psyched to have you joining me here on mine. Stand Up with Pete Dominick, available every day by 4 a.m. Consider a paid subscription. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes, or just go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick and support the show for as little as $5. If you haven't done it yet, what are you waiting for? And I'm here for you. I want to hear from you. So reach out to me on Patreon or email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, @Pete Dominick. Going up to Nantucket on Thursday, where I will be doing the show from. Looking forward to taking a little break. Is that irresponsible? I'm not sure, but we're just seeing one person, staying with one person in her small house and hanging out up there on the beach. And hopefully, I can't imagine that's irresponsible, is it? We're not going out to bars and restaurants. We're not socializing with other people. It's just my family and her. So that's cool, right? Hey, please tell me I'm all right. Okay, I'm here for you. I love you. You're not alone. You're not alone. I'm right here with you on the journey. I'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up.